So, so I've got three daughters here that live at home. Beautiful daughters, love my kids. I got five total. My two others are older, having their own. They've made me a proud grandpa, so I'm happy. So my three though, that live at home, I call them my young thugs. And if you can see that picture behind me, that's them there. And if you see that, the two down there on the bottom, you see my youngest one over there trying to look like really badass with her glasses upside down on her face. And the other one's like throwing up gang signs, but I had to cut out that part, you know, because they don't want to have no west side. But anyways, so my wife was not able to conceive, so we decided to go the adoption route. So we adopted our first daughter, Gabby, back when she was a baby, like back in 2005, and she's 16 now. And then we adopted our other two, the two younger ones, Annalisa and Catherine, in 2014. We went did the whole foster care thing and got that going. So just to kind of give you some background on that, like, you know, somebody came to us and was like, hey, would you like to foster these kids, you know? And at first we were like, you know, but we thought, okay, you know, we'll do it. You know, fostering, it's just for a while. They're supposed to go back to their mom and dad. Their parents just need some help for a little bit to straighten themselves out. So that's what Jesus will want us to do. So we go ahead and sign up for the classes, because you got to go through like a whole buttload of classes to get approved, you know, like take CPR. And then so in the classes, we did them like every weekend we'd go. And in one of the classes they had, it was like all about disciplining, you know. And I'm like, you know, I know how to smack a kid around, beat their ass. Like my parents beat my ass good when I was young. So what did I just beat them like that? So, but we found out, you know, when they're foster children, you're not supposed to hit them. You know, it's not supposed to happen when they're foster care because, well, you know, they're not your kids. So, well, that's cool. But like while we're reading through the material and shit, you're looking up there and you're talking about like, no hitting the kids. Okay, that's a gimme. No locking them in the closet. Okay, I mean, we don't do that with our regular kids, but y'all, they had on there, no stun guns or zapping your children. Like, what the fuck? Because you know somebody had to do that shit for them to put it in the book. Like, who in the hell is gonna zap or taser their kid? Not to say that wouldn't be cool sometimes, you know, because your kids can drive you crazy, but, you know, that's wrong. Of course, you know, that's wrong. So it's like, damn. I told my wife, I was like, you know, somebody had to do that shit because they would not put that in the book otherwise. So anyways, we get through that. And we get through, and then we're just waiting on the process to get approved. And so while we're waiting, it's like Easter time. My wife says, you know, I want to make some Easter baskets and take it to the little girls that are living at the shelter. So that way they know we're thinking about them. I'm like, all right. So she makes some baskets because she's all into that crafty stuff. And so we drive over there to the shelter and she goes in there. I'm like, you go on in because, you know, only one of us needs to go in there. Like, I'll stay out here in the car with our other daughter, Gabby. So she went in there. And so when she comes out after like 15, 20 minutes, and she just starts bawling. I'm like, just crying. She's like, you should have seen that. The little girl, Catherine, she was just holding my legs. And she goes by Kitty is her nickname. And she was just holding my legs and didn't want me to go. And she was calling me mommy. And I'm just bawling. And then she's like, she got me kind of a little sweaty-eyed, you know, like, you know, I'm not a monster or nothing like that. But that should have been my first clue, though. You know, these young thugs, man, they're trying to melt our hearts and stuff so that they could come in our home and just take over. So finally, we get the approval. And so it's a big day. We're all waiting. And the family services person is supposed to drive them to our house and, you know, like introduce them to us and then leave them there. And, you know, that's it. And then we just go through the whole stuff there. So my next hint should have been like when the family services person came. They like pulled up, brakes screeching and shit, like just stop. And it's like the doors just flung open. And it was kind of like one of them tuck and roll situations, like, get out, here's your bag, here's the kids, thank you. And it wasn't exactly like that, but that's how it felt. So I'm like, all right, so, the girls come in and we get to know them a little bit, Annalisa, Catherine, and then, everything settled in, get their rooms done, got their rooms all made up pretty with their names so that they can come there. And then a couple of days, two later, I'm noticing that they are scratching the hell out of their heads. And I'm like, oh man, I told my wife, I was like, check out those kids. And so she went and looked, and sure enough, y'all, they had lice on their head. Like, oh man. So I had to run, and it gets me itchy just talking about it. But I had to go get some shit from Walgreens and CVS. I'm like coming with all kinds of stuff. And we're like using it all, and that shit ain't working. Like, them lice did not want to leave because they were like living with them in the shelter. They like living at our house much better than they did in the shelter. So the lice was like, we ain't going nowhere. So I had to call a friend of ours who's a doctor, and he prescribed some prescription stamped lice killer. And so we used that. Thankfully, it all went away. We got rid of them, but you got to do the whole cleanup and all that stuff when you got that kind of shit going around. So fast forward, my mother-in-law decides to come down because she wants to meet the little girls and see them. Let me see the little Mexican girls. So she's white, comes down, and I'm kind of hesitant about that to begin with because my mother-in-law and them, they're not the most non-racist people, I had a few little things with them when I lived there up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But anyways, that's for another time. So she comes down, and we're like, hey, we haven't been on a date or nothing in a while because, we've been having to watch all these kids now. So would you mind watching them and just letting us go out for a while or whatever? So she was like, yeah, because she came down and my wife's sister came down. So they both were going to stay there and watch them. So we go, we're like, oh, we're just enjoying our time at the movies, laying there, just chilling, watching the movies, eating dinner. And then we come home, and my mother-in-law's like, these children behaved horribly. And I'm like, what happened? And so what happened was like one of the kids was misbehaving or whatever. And my mother-in-law got onto her about misbehaving. And evidently that little girl, Kitty, she did not like that. And so my mother-in-law told her something, and she's like, no, bitch. And so my mother-in-law popped her in the butt and was like, we don't speak like that here. Oh, man, you should have seen them. The other one, Lala, she saw her spank her sister. And it's like, she was deep in the hood now, in the barrio. And they, both of them, man, they like grabbed my mother-in-law's leg and started kicking her and hitting her and stuff like that. And like her sister had to help pull him off and everything on there. I was like, damn. And so I couldn't believe that because I hadn't seen any of that type of behavior out of them up until this point. So we're sitting there, we're looking at the girls, talking to them, how they can't behave that way. And so we're like, okay, you're going to have to go in your room, time out for like 30 minutes and stay in your room. So we put them in the room and we close the door. And no sooner did we close the door, guys, and them two just started kicking and hitting the door and just hitting. And I'm like, what? And then all of a sudden, they're like, motherfucker, open this door or I'm gonna kick your ass. Open this fucking door, man. Let me come out there and kick your ass. This is from a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I'm looking at my wife and I'm like, holy shit, what have we done? What have we gotten ourselves into? And they're still just kicking. So finally I open the door and I'm like, cause, I'm gonna open it and I'm like, I can't show no fear, I want them to know that they scared me. So I'm like opening the door, I'm like, y'all better stop that right now. And like they calm down and look back, because I had that, I got a bitchy looking face for what a lot of people tell me. But I don't know. I mean, I think I look cute, but people think that I can look mean and unapproachable. So that stopped the girls. And they like backed off and like, okay, we'll chill. But leave the door open, man. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna leave the door open. But you better stay here in your room and you better stop that cussing because that's not acceptable in this house. We don't cuss here like that. They're like, fine. So we got through that traumatic event. So we decided like, man, we need to take these kids to church because they need some Jesus. I'm not sure if they've been to church or know about Jesus or what. So come Sunday, man, we're like, let's get in the car. We're going to church. And so we're driving there to church, and I'm like, honey, do you think that maybe one of us should go into the Sunday school class with them? I was like, because what happens if all of a sudden they go all Mexican on them and just start cussing and hitting at the teachers and stuff? Like, we can't be responsible for that. Like, what are they gonna think? And my wife's like, that's a good idea. She's like, maybe we should for a little while until they get calmed down. I'm like, yeah, because, they could be in there hitting and, we're going to walk in and you're going to see seeing those counselors like, the power of Christ compels you, like trying to pray on their head and like make them stop, get the demons out, with all that. The kids are going to be like, fuck yeah. Like, so my wife went in there with them. And she stayed in there, and after a few weeks, it all stopped, and they were on their better behavior. But I'm gonna tell you what, though, like at that church we went to, they had like this prison system. It was like every kid had a number. So, and at the beginning of service, you would print out that number and put it on your shirt, and they put a matching number on their shirt, so that way when you went to pick them up, then they would match him and they would know like, this is Harry's kid and this is his kid. But the bad part about that is that if your kid did bad and you're sitting in church and they're in their Sunday school class, their number would flash on the screen, like just flashing and flashing. And I can't tell you how many times we would have to get up and go back there, just to sit in there for a while to calm the situation down. Like, I've been in the military and I've seen death and stuff like that, and I got some PTSD, but man, ain't no shit can give you some PTSD but like sitting there just staring at the screen. Every time a number would come up there, you're like looking at your shit like, is that me? And like, and after having done it so many times, usually you sit around the same people at church and stuff. And as soon as a number would flash, they'd be like looking at me like, so you're a kid? And I'm like, nah, we're good. And they all just shake their head and be like, we're putting your name in the basket, brother, for prayer. Every day we put that in there. I'm like, thank you. And then like sometimes when the number would come up in those eyes, I'm like, they're like, your number? I'm like, yeah, I gotta go. Like, praying for you, brother. And I had to go get the kids and sit with them or my wife. But man, like, that's part of the reason I call them young thugs. And I got lots more to tell you about them as the time goes on. Bye.